Welcome to Capital Gains, Yahoo Finance's unique look at how US government policy will affect your bottom line long after the presidential election polls have closed. Now, obviously, we're in the home stretch here ahead of the November 5th election, but we're seeing some closeness here, at least on the betting market. So we're going to be taking a look at what that means and how that's impacting the stock market and the psychology behind that. We will be having a guest to talk about what's been happening with the polls as well. To help us, we'll be joined by Jim Bianco, president and macro strategist of Bianco Research, to break all of this down. I'm Rochelle O'Coof, and of course, have to welcome in my co-stars, Ben Werschel and Rick Newman, to see what they're keeping track of this week. Ben, kick it off for us.
Yeah, so I've got my note card. I've got more billionaires on my note card though. So I had to do two of them. I've broken them down into this sort of shy and loud billionaires. I'll start with the kind of shy ones, these poor retiring billionaires. A lot of news on this front this week. As I'm alluding to, there's Jamie Dimon is a big one. He is, as we've sort of learned this week, and I've been doing reporting with my colleague David Hollerith on this, he's leaning towards Harris behind closed doors, but he's unlikely to say anything in person. He's still doing a lot of events. He's giving speeches, doing all these things, but he's sort of staying out of presidential politics. But and this is obviously one of the big endorsements that could happen, but it seems increasingly unlikely to. Another kind of shy billionaire is that we learned about this week is Bill Gates. He gave $50 million, excuse me, but it was to a dark money group, and he was intended to keep quiet. Eventually the New York Times unearthed it, so we kind of know he's doing it. And this is he was supporting Harris. But sort of didn't want folks to know about it, and now people do. There's a kind of a middle group here that are kind of shy but impactful groups. Oh, a third shy one for you is Warren Buffett. This is a guy who 8 years ago was campaigning with Hillary Clinton. This year, he announced he's not doing any presidential endorsements. So he's always been a big one to watch in this space, and he's sticking out. The kind of shy but impactful folks, Bill Gates could probably fall into that category. Another one is just these overall billionaires. The top 5 billionaires, believe it or not, are all Republicans. They're not Elon Musk, interestingly, and they've given about $600 million to Republicans, both Trump and the candidates. So these are folks like Tim Mellon, Miriam Adelson, folks like that are giving a ton of money, historic amounts, but you kind of less know their names. And then the third group, real quickly, is the loud ones. You can guess my very first one. It's
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. He's everywhere. He's campaigning. He's Tim Walz calls him Donald Trump's running mate, which honestly isn't that far from true at this point. He's barnstorming Pennsylvania. It looks like he may travel elsewhere, and he's just dumping a ton of money into the race, and he's very prominent. And
guys,
final group.
Go Ben.
Ahead, Rick.
Go ahead.
Oh, just the very last on my list is loud but cheap billionaires, or we don't know how much they're giving, at least. Mark Cuban and Bill Ackman are sort of folks in this group who we hear a lot about, but they're less involved financially in the group. So it's a lot of different ways for billionaires to get involved.
Okay, I wish I could just ask our millions of viewers, just raise your hand. Do you prefer the loud billionaires or the quiet billionaires? I mean, wouldn't we all be happier if all these billionaires just shut up? I don't mind that there are billionaires, but the ones who just feel like everybody should trust me, I know how to run this country. Yes, I'm talking about Elon Musk and some of those other Trump tech bros. I mean, these people are just annoying. And just to add some perspective to this, so I did a survey of Yahoo Finance users this week. We've got a story out on this. And Elon Musk's involvement with Donald Trump isn't necessarily helping Donald Trump. So one of the questions I asked is, does Elon Musk's support for Donald Trump make you more likely to vote for Trump or less likely to vote for Trump? And among all respondents, including people of all parties, 25% said more likely to vote for Trump now that Elon Musk is helping out, but 28% said they are less likely to vote for Trump because of Elon Musk's involvement. And when you break it out down to people who say they're still undecided, 21% say more likely to vote for Trump because of Musk, but 28% say less likely to vote for Donald Trump because of Elon Musk's involvement. So that's a 7-point swing against Donald Trump. That's sort of a negative Elon Musk factor. And I would point out that this is not just Yahoo Finance. I mean, the Democratic polling group Blueprint just put out some research. They surveyed young men between the ages of 18 and 29. That is a group Kamala Harris is having a lot of trouble getting, and Trump seems to be winning. But they also said that Elon Musk's involvement with Donald Trump makes them slightly less likely to support Trump. So I guess part of the takeaway here is be careful which billionaires support you.
Mhm.
I mean, you raise a good point, especially if you have very big, very strong personalities in Trump and in Musk. So if you're a Republican thinking, okay, who should I be voting for? You have these very big personalities. If you were already on the fence, I was surprised by how much people were put off by the idea of Musk joining. I mean, they know, his views. He's very vocal about it on X. So I'm wondering what the actual outcome will be, how much that influence is
Yeah.
actually going to affect.
Well, I mean,
voters.
this race is so close that, and I always want to remind people we're talking about the 7 swing states: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and North Carolina. It really matters what a small percentage of voters in those 7 states matter. But I mean, if you can, in these last few days before the election is over, if you can persuade a fraction of 1% of undecided voters to come your direction in the final minutes, I mean, that could turn out to be crucial. We don't know yet. Let's go back to Jamie Dimon for a second. He gets criticized for. I mean, I think everybody knows Jamie Dimon leans Democrat. I mean, he is always kind of signed up. I mean, at least in the modern era, identified more with Obama, for example. And he has sort of Democratic leanings as somebody who's I think he's from Queens, New York. I don't think it makes any difference whether Jamie Dimon endorses anybody in this election. I'm not sure it makes any difference if any business leader endorses anybody. I think a lot of the time they do this because they're hoping for favors. They usually do it when they're pretty convinced the person they're backing is going to win, and they want to get on the right side of the law when that person wins. I mean, Jamie Dimon, anybody who runs a company, I mean, you have to know at this point, especially if it's a company that has retail consumers, if you endorse one candidate or the other, you're going to get it. You are guaranteed to get a backlash. And if Jamie Dimon were to say what he probably thinks, which is I'm behind Kamala Harris, we all know that millions of MAGA customers who use J.P. Morgan in some fashion, there have to be some of those people, would just say, I'm out of here. I'm not doing business with this bank. I mean, that has happened to Delta Airlines with issues relating to the National Rifle Association. And I think, CEOs, their first obligation is not to any voting bloc. It's to their shareholders to make sure they safeguard the value of the company. So I think Jamie Dimon is justified in not wading into this election.
Yeah, one additional bit on the blowback aspect I've been trying to explore this week in working with Dave Pollard on this is the kind of balance between the blowback question and the issues question, because I think that second one is also important for a lot of these folks. There's the blowback, which people consider, and the billionaires will or their people will tell you that they don't care about that. They can overcome this. But there is sort of real tensions on both sides in terms of whether they agree with them. Harris has her supporters, but she also has these ideas that billionaires really don't like: unrealized capital gains, all these tax policies, raising the corporate tax rate that is a sort of blocker for people, even if they like her on other stuff. Trump has his blockers as well, but they like some of his policies. They tend to dislike a lot of his personal attributes, January 6th, all these things. So there's kind of, I think both are at play for a lot of these folks.
Almost all business leaders hate Trump's tariffs. And we all know that every one of these people, if you're running a big company, you employ basically a political operation in D.C., political analysis, or you subscribe to it, and they're telling you all these Kamala Harris policies. Sure, she can have this policy. There's no way she's going to get it through what's going to be a closely divided Congress. I mean, we're probably never going to have a wealth tax not anytime soon in the United States, and possibly never, because it might be unconstitutional. That's just not going to happen. A lot of these other, Biden couldn't even get the corporate tax rate raised when Democrats controlled both houses of Congress for his first 2 years. Kamala Harris wants to do that, but Biden couldn't do it, so what makes us think Kamala Harris is going to do it? So if you're a billionaire, do you really care about something that's going to change a tax rate by a couple of percentage points? I guess there's some who do. I think this is just about wielding power and influence.
I think it depends. Obviously, you have CEOs of publicly traded companies, and we've talked about this before, having their fiduciary duty and perhaps not choosing to weigh in. We know consistently Warren Buffett is one of those CEOs who does not weigh in on political issues as well. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure if people are going to be pulling their money out of J.P. Morgan if they did get an outright endorsement from Jamie Dimon, because at the end of the day, people care about their bottom line. I'm not sure how many people are going to be willing to pull out their money if they're looking at the stock price and they're seeing things doing well. So I'm not sure, at least in the case of Jamie Dimon, that you'd see people sort of fleeing away. People thought everyone was going to, stop buying all the Teslas once Elon Musk made his political views known. People didn't. People are still buying Teslas. So it depends if people put their money and their votes where their mouth is.
Well,
But
and
we will be right back. We have to take a
right.
quick break on.
Oh, you can't leave that hanging. Okay, that's a whole other podcast.
Cliffhanger. Hold that
That's
thought.
a whole
Hold
other
that thought.
podcast.
Yeah, we'll do that next week.
Hold that thought. Capital Gains will be right back after this break. Welcome back to Capital Gains. Joining us now is Jim Bianco, President and Macro Strategist of Bianco Research. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we've been talking about what the betting markets are doing. If you could briefly just give us a quick 101 on this, for people who aren't familiar with sort of what it's really tallying up and how that's reflected in perhaps versus polls and other things that we're looking at.
Yeah, so 101 on the betting markets. They've been around for a long time. The earliest recorded betting markets were in the 16th century when the Italians were betting on who was going to be the next pope. Famously, in the earliest 20th century, Winston Churchill was supposedly one of the biggest manipulators of betting markets in the British markets, always betting on who was going to win in Parliament. So the reason I bring this up is that this is not new. In the United States, the betting markets go all the way back to the Civil War. If you were in Topeka, Kansas in 1888, and they wanted to write a story about who's going to win the election for 1888, Benjamin Harrison, they would actually quote the betting markets that traded on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, which did from the Civil War until the 1930s. So they kind of went away with the Securities and Exchange Act in the 1930s and the advent of George Gallup with polling. And they came back in the late 80s and early 90s with the Iowa political stock market. And now I went through all that because I wanted to make sure everybody understands when we talk about these betting markets, these are not new. They are just new because we've got the internet that has made them new. We've had them electronically through the internet since the 1992 election. So we've seen them in various forms: Iowa political stock market, trade sports, in trade, predicted, and now we've got Kalshi and Polymarket as being the two bigger ones. Currently, Trump is leading in the betting markets. He's trading around 62% probability that he's going to win the election on Polymarket. He's trading around 57, 58 on Kalshi. The big difference between the two is Polymarket has an agreement with the Commodity Futures Trading Commission that it cannot accept U.S. investors, but Kalshi can accept U.S. investors. And it won a court case in early October and it started trading on October 3rd.
So, Jim, and I'd like to point out to people, Real Clear Politics has an aggregate of, I think it's an aggregate of 8 betting markets. So if you just want a snapshot, it sort of wraps up what they all think. Help us understand what should ordinary people think about? Is this giving us an accurate gauge of where this election stands, or is it distorted by the nature of the bets and by the fact that this does not represent the public in general? It represents people self-inclined to bet on markets, and most of them supposedly aren't even Americans. So, is this 62% for Trump? Is that like real or not really?
So there's two ways to answer that question. The first way is if you look at the polls, whether you're looking at, and most people tend to want to look at polling averages or aggregates that are put out by 538 or Silver Bulletin, which is Nate Silver's Substack.
And Real Clear Politics has that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Real Clear Politics, The Economist magazine have that. And if you start looking at those, they also put together models off of this as to who they think is going to win. Now, depending on which model you look at, Trump is leading between 52 and 56%, between, say, 538 and The Economist magazine. Well, he's trading at 57 to 62 in the betting markets. So he's trading slightly above that. Now, that's not unusual for two reasons. Reason one, Trump has been gaining ground over the last few weeks, and the whole point of the betting markets is they're supposed to anticipate what's coming next. So they're kind of thinking, well, that trend is going to continue. Doesn't mean they're right. It's just that there's a logical reason for why it's trading there. And the second thing is these are probabilities, and people really mistake what a probability is. I see it all the time on Twitter. Trump is leading by 20 points, 60-40. That's not a 20-point lead when it's talking about probability. So being it's football season, I've tried to put this into football. football metaphor, and I'll use Trump. If he is trading under 66%, which he is and has been since Harris came into the race, think about it as in a football game, he's leading by less than 3 points. All she's got to do is get the ball back, kick a field goal, and she wins the game. It's not insurmountable for her to do that. If he leads by more than 66 to 80%, then he's leading in football parlance between 3 and 7 points. She's got to get the ball back and score a touchdown. It's a little harder. If he's leading by more than 80%, he's leading by more than 7 points in a football metaphor. Now she's got to score twice, and it becomes even harder from there. So with him trading 57 to 62, late in the fourth quarter, to stick with my football metaphor, yeah, she's behind. He's ahead. And yeah, based on where the polls are and the betting markets are, that's about where he should be trading. But it's hardly an insurmountable thing for her to overcome in the final days of the election. If she can overcome it, that's the next question to be answered.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that sort of anticipation question. That difference between like what the Nate Silver model shows and what the betting markets are. You've summarized these markets in a way that I think is helpful for people. It's a reflection of current polling plus future expectations. And I guess I'm curious. My question is could you just replace future expectations with vibes? And is that a better way for people to understand it? That this is just sort of how people are feeling, a snapshot of how people are feeling at the moment, as opposed to some crystal ball about the future.
Trader vibes.
Sure. Yes, sure. You could do that. Think about the stock market, right? It's discounted cash flow of earnings plus some multiple. And what is multiple? It's vibes. It's how do you feel about it? Is it a good company or a bad company? Well, that's kind of what, the vibes are. And where do the vibes come from? Look, I'm making one assumption when it comes to the betting markets. Yeah, you're right. They might be a bunch of crypto bros in there because Polymarket, if you're not familiar with it, trades. It's a crypto market. It trades in the Polygon network, on the Polygon level 2 on the Ethereum network, and you need to use a stable coin to buy into that market. So yeah, it's a bunch of crypto bros, and they're all MAGA hat wearing guys. Fine, that might be true, but they want to make money. They're there to make money. So therefore, you could say, sure, that it's a bunch of those guys. But if they're there to make money, it's an accurate representation. And yes, those vibes are there. And I think that the reason those vibes are there is most of them tend to be statistically oriented, and they're just looking at charts of the betting markets and doing simple technical analysis and saying Trump's in an uptrend, and you want to buy an uptrend. Trump has momentum. And so that's where I think it's really going. The vibes is not that they like his border policy or they like his tax policy. I don't think there's anything to it more than just simple technical analysis.
So, Jim, when you have whales coming into it, like Freddie 9999, throwing these massive bets in that then sort of play into that psychology that perhaps Trump is doing better than expected, but it is only based on those betting markets. How does that skew things? Does that tend to be sort of an art imitates life reality in the end, or is it just keep sort of the betting markets in their own lane?
No, I don't think. I think that we vastly overstate the amount of the whales, in these markets. Look, I've been following these markets. I've traded in these markets since '92. I lost a ton of money in them in 2000 as well because I didn't read the contract correctly. I thought I was betting on who was going to be the president, but it turned out to be the popular vote, and that's why I ended up losing a lot of money. So read the contract and make
Best
sure
way to learn,
you know what
lose money.
Yes, exactly. Read the contract. Make sure you understand what you're investing in as well. As far as the whales go, no. See, the assumption there is somebody's going to dump a lot of money in this market. It's going to make it trade in a way that you can't explain from the polls or the vibes or the trend, which I don't think is the case. Therefore, the rest of the country is going to notice that they're trading at a wrong level, and it's going to change everybody's vote, or it's going to change the amount of people that want to turn out and vote. I don't think it's going to change a single vote. It's not worth anybody's time to manipulate this market, because if you want to push Trump to 99 tomorrow, that's not going to get anybody to vote for him. If you want to push him to 1 tomorrow, that's going to get nobody to not vote for him. So what's happened with these whales is they're just speculating. They're just speculating in big numbers is what they're doing. And these markets, even with the whales, I think are trading in appropriate ranges. Now, the last thing I'm pointing out, in watching these markets since the early 90s, in the last 10 days, and we're 12 days out, you could expect the volume in these markets to double 1 to 2 more times. So yesterday we traded about 75 million shares in these markets. They were trading 28 million shares a week ago. I wouldn't be surprised if by the day before the election, which is in 11 days, they're trading 2 to 300 million shares a day. All of a sudden, that 40 million shares that Freddie 999 owns is going to look very, very small in the regards of the entire market. So if he manipulated that market to a place where it wasn't going to be, it's already overcome that, and it's kind of settled out into its proper place.
Guys, I mean, Freddie 9999 supposedly is a French trader. I assume he's a Yahoo Finance user. So, Freddie, I mean, you're watching this show. We know you're watching. Come and talk to us. Jim, what I want to ask you might be the last question about betting markets. So there are different forms of the so-called Trump trade. A direct one is Trump's own company, DJT, Trump Media and Technology. And then, Wall Street has identified some other trades. I mean, crypto is probably one of them. Utilities is another. So the question is, do you think real traders in the financial markets are seeing what's happening in the betting markets with Trump gaining momentum? And based on that, they are increasingly making these other Trump trades in which they are actually betting on Trump, however they might be doing it?
Oh, I think it's a two-way street with that. You're right that Trump, DJT, Trump Media, which owns Truth Social, is probably the biggest meme stock in the stock market right now. And it's just trading on the vibes and the belief that whether or not Trump is going to become the president or not. And I think that a lot of the bettors in the betting markets are looking at DJT and seeing it's rallying and saying, we got to buy here. And a lot of DJT people are looking at Polly and saying he's rallying there, so we got to buy there. So they kind of feed off each other. And, if you overlaid them on a chart, they're all kind of the same thing. Bitcoin is perceived to be, it's an orange coin and it's an orange man. It's perceived to be kind of tied up with Trump as well. And then Wall Street's got all these other types of ideas. You're supposed to buy the prison stocks if Trump isn't elected, or, the defense stocks because he's a law and order guy, or the defense, not that he's going to go to one, or he's a law and order guy as well. You're supposed to buy technology if Harris wins. So a lot of this is like a two-way street, and it's all part of the bigger game of trying to, game out who's going to win the election and trying to make a profit off of it.
Guys, just for everybody, go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Real quick before we go, what do you advise? What are you advising either clients or family members who are coming to you to see these betting markets saying, should I put money behind Trump? What do you tell them?
Well, you put money behind Trump because you think he's going to win. You don't put money behind Trump because you think it's going to manipulate the markets, or if it's going to make you feel better that you put money behind Trump, put a lawn sign out. It's a lot less money.
That's true.
Guys, I want everybody. So don't leave Yahoo Finance. I'm going to try to do a Trump trade next week. I haven't figured. I'm going to get somebody to help me structure it and hopefully write about it, so you guys can all watch along as I make a really dumb investment decision.
All right, we'll be tracking your progress or lack thereof, Rick. A big thank you to Jim, Ben, Rick, and from myself. That does it for this episode of Capital Gains. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks much.
Thank you.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously.
We all have something money-related that we want to hide.
Our podcast brings you these stories.
Living Not So Fabulously from Yahoo Finance drops on your favorite platform every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time.